In our last video, we uncovered a massive paradox: how American innovation, branding, and consumption were built on a supply chain that stretched thousands of miles, straight into the heart of China. We peeled back the layers of how China rose from a low-cost manufacturing hub to a global industrial giant. We explored the hidden role of logistics, the crumbling American infrastructure, and the powerful economic forces that made designed in the United States, made in China the default reality. But what if I told you that behind the factories, behind the shipping containers, behind the booming ports, there's an even deeper game being played? A game that isn't about finished products, but about the very raw materials needed to create the future. Today, we go underground, into the hidden battle for control over the resources that power modern technology, energy, and warfare. Because the real supply chain war has only just begun. When we talk about the global economy, most of us think about finished products, the iPhone in your hand, the electric car in your driveway, the fighter jets defending the skies. But very few people ever ask a simple, deeper question: where do the building blocks come from? And once you start asking that question, one truth becomes clear. China isn't just the world's factory. It's becoming the world's mine, too. Let's start with rare earth metals, the unsung heroes of modern technology. These 17 elements are hidden inside almost every piece of tech we rely on: smartphones, laptops, wind turbines, electric vehicles, even advanced military hardware. Without rare earths like neodymium, you wouldn't have powerful magnets for motors. Without europium, you wouldn't have those bright, crisp screens. Without lanthanum, night vision goggles wouldn't exist. In short, no rare earths, no modern life. And guess who dominates the rare earth supply chain? That's right, China. Today, China controls about 70% of the world's rare earth production. And when you include the refining process, turning raw or into usable materials, China's grip becomes even tighter. America used to lead in rare earth mining decades ago, but environmental concerns and low prices pushed production overseas. Meanwhile, China kept mining, refining, and building expertise, often at environmental and human cost the West wasn't willing to accept. The result? A 21st century world that's utterly dependent on China for the invisible materials behind its gadgets and weapons. But rare earths are just the beginning. Let's talk about energy, the energy inside your electric vehicle, your smartphone, your future power grid. At the heart of this energy revolution are two materials: lithium and cobalt. Lithium powers the batteries that are supposed to free us from fossil fuels. Cobalt makes those batteries stable, safe, and long-lasting. Here's where things get complicated. While lithium is mined across countries like Australia, Chile, and Argentina, and cobalt is pulled from the mines of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the refining, the processing, the real control point happens mostly in China. In fact, China processes over 70% of the world's lithium and over 80% of the world's cobalt. So even if an American EV company wants to source its raw materials elsewhere, at some point, the supply chain loops back through China. Imagine that, the so-called Green Revolution, powered by batteries refined by China's factories. This isn't just about cars or phones. It's about national ambition, economic dominance, and energy independence. And right now, the scoreboard favors China. Now, you might say, wait, isn't Taiwan the leader in semiconductors? Yes, Taiwan's TSMC builds the most advanced chips on Earth. But here's the catch. Before you even make a chip, you need a cocktail of raw materials like gallium, germanium, tungsten, and rare earths. And who refines most of these critical inputs? You guessed it, China. In fact, China recently flexed its muscles by restricting exports of gallium and germanium, a chilling reminder of just how much power it holds over the tech industry. It's not just about fancy smartphones. We're talking about critical components for satellites, weapons systems, AI servers, and medical equipment. If China tightens the tap, the entire Western tech machine could stall. All of this paints a clear picture. America is standing on a fragile foundation, a foundation where raw materials, the things you can't easily substitute or replace, are increasingly controlled by a strategic competitor. And if the past few years have taught us anything, with pandemic shortages, chip crises, and rising geopolitical tensions, it's that supply chains matter. Right now, China holds the cards, and in a real conflict or economic standoff, those cards could become weapons. Think about it. Fighter jets grounded because of missing alloys. Clean energy projects stalled because of missing batteries. AI research slowed because of missing rare metals. This isn't just a business problem. It's a national security crisis waiting to happen. The race to secure the future. Hopeful but urgent tone. The good news? Awareness is rising. America is finally waking up to the risk. With policies like the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and new investments in domestic mining and processing. But rebuilding supply chains will take years, maybe decades, and it won't be easy. Mining is dirty, expensive, and politically controversial. Refining is energy-intensive and regulated. Setting up domestic processing plants won't happen overnight. Meanwhile, China isn't standing still. They're locking in mineral rights in Africa, South America, and even parts of Europe. They're building a future where they control not just manufacturing, but the very elements of progress itself. Whoever controls the mines controls the future. And unless America and its allies get serious about raw materials, the next great economic battle won't be fought in stock markets or boardrooms. It'll be fought underground, in the dirt, over the atoms that power our lives. In 2025, the world's two largest economies went head-to-head again. This time, with sharper tools, deeper stakes, and global consequences that no one could ignore. This isn't the first United States-China trade war, but it might be the most consequential one yet. Back in 2018, Donald Trump launched a barrage of tariffs on Chinese goods, over $360 billion worth, aiming to punish unfair trade practices and force Beijing to play by American rules. China retaliated. Farmers suffered. Prices rose. But over time, things calmed down. Until now, fast forward to 2025, and the tensions have flared again. This time, not as a campaign stunt, but as a geopolitical chess move in a high-stakes struggle for global dominance. President Trump, newly reelected and emboldened by nationalist rhetoric, signed a sweeping executive order in March, imposing new tariffs ranging from 20% to 60% on semiconductors, electric vehicles, solar panels, and green tech imports from China. The rationale? Protect American industry from unfair competition and reduce reliance on adversaries. But the real reasons go deeper. Strategic control over emerging technologies, supply chain sovereignty, and domestic political capital. China hit back within days, targeting the United States agricultural goods, aircraft components, and even Hollywood media licensing. On paper, tariffs sound patriotic, but in practice, they're blunt instruments, and American businesses are feeling the blow. Take Apple. Though assembly has started shifting to India and Vietnam, over 40% of its supply chain still flows through Chinese subcontractors. The new tariffs on electronics components are forcing Apple to either raise prices or absorb billions in cost. Tesla? Even worse. Chinese battery suppliers like CATL have hiked prices to offset tariffs. American-made EVs now face higher production costs, precisely when China's BYD is expanding globally with cheaper, government-backed vehicles. United States farmers, already bruised from years of trade uncertainty, are once again caught in the crossfire. China has reduced soybean imports from the EU by over 30% this quarter, turning instead to Brazil. Small manufacturers? Devastated. Midwestern toolmakers, reliant on Chinese steel and aluminum, are being squeezed by rising input costs and delayed shipments. A recent Chamber of Commerce report estimated that the new 2025 tariffs could cost the American economy $125 billion annually if no relief measures are enacted. Now, let's be clear, China isn't emerging unscathed. The 2025 tariffs have put immense pressure on its export-heavy economy. Manufacturing growth has slowed to 3.1% this quarter, a sharp drop from the 6% average of the past decade. Foreign investors, already spooked by China's regulatory crackdowns and opaque legal systems, are accelerating their exits. Intel, HP, and Qualcomm have all announced plans to relocate R&D hubs to Southeast Asia. And while the Chinese yuan has weakened, giving exporters a temporary price edge, it's also triggered capital flight and worsened inflation at home. Beijing's response? Doubling down on domestic consumption, regional trade deals like RCEP, and pushing Made in China 2025, its industrial policy to replace Western tech with homegrown alternatives. So no, China's not collapsing, but it's definitely bleeding. But here's the kicker. This isn't just a United States, China story. It's a global earthquake. Supply chains are being reshuffled. Prices are spiking. Countries that rely on components from both giants are stuck in the middle. Vietnam and Mexico are seeing a boom as companies reroute production to avoid tariffs. But they're struggling with labor shortages and rising wages. Germany's auto sector, deeply integrated with both United States and Chinese markets, is experiencing severe margin compression. BMW and Volkswagen have issued profit warnings. African nations, caught in China's Belt and Road debt web, are facing reduced investment as Beijing focuses inward. Even developing countries are feeling it. Solar panel prices have surged due to restrictions on cheap Chinese imports. Clean energy projects in Africa and Southeast Asia are being delayed or canceled. And don't forget inflation, already elevated from post-COVID and energy shocks, is now being reignited by tariffs on critical goods like lithium batteries, fertilizer, and semiconductors. Global trade volume has shrunk too, 7% year-over-year according to the WTO's April report, with real consequences for jobs, growth, and poverty reduction worldwide. Beyond the economics lies the politics, and that's where the real danger lurks. The 2025 trade war is reshaping alliances. Europe is caught in a bind, torn between its transatlantic loyalty and massive Chinese market exposure. The EU is pushing for strategic autonomy, launching its own digital and battery subsidies while avoiding explicit alignment with either side. India is playing both ends, welcoming you investments while quietly increasing trade with China to capitalize on gaps. Russia, cheering from the sidelines, offering raw materials to China and watching the West tear itself apart. And in the global south, from Latin America to Southeast Asia, many countries feel like pawns, pressured to choose sides while longing for neutrality. This trade war isn't just about goods. It's about who writes the rules for the 21st century economy. Open markets or economic nationalism. Shared progress or zero-sum rivalry. So, is there any silver lining in this mess? Yes, but it comes with a price. In the United States, the tariffs have accelerated a long overdue conversation about supply chain resilience, industrial policy, and economic independence. Congress is finally funding domestic semiconductor fabs through the CHIPS Act 2. Green tech subsidies are luring EV battery manufacturers back home. Defense contractors are diversifying rare earth sourcing away from China. The trade war is painful, but it's forcing innovation, investment, and reindustrialization. For China, the tariffs are pushing the country to climb the value chain, to become not just a factory, but a tech and design powerhouse. Beijing's push into AI, quantum computing, and biotech is partly a response to Western pressure. The danger, though, is this. If both sides become fully decoupled, we risk two incompatible systems, two internets, two standards, two economies, with reduced efficiency and greater tension. Here's the hard truth most headlines miss. Trade wars don't have clear winners. They create inflation. They destroy trust. They push companies and consumers into uncertainty. And they risk turning economic rivalry into geopolitical confrontation. The 2025 United States China trade war isn't just about tariffs. It's a mirror reflecting deeper anxieties about sovereignty, control, and the future of globalization. The question now isn't who wins. It's how far we're willing to go before everyone loses. Let's be real. The West says it wants to leave China, but can it really? Or are we just playing a global game of musical chairs with supply chains that always lead back to Beijing? In this chapter, we unpack a crucial question. Can America actually diversify its manufacturing and reduce dependency on China, or is it just swapping problems for different ones? Manufacturing moves. The Vietnam, India, and Mexico shuffle. For the past 5 years, we've heard the same headlines. Apple moves iPhone assembly to India. Nike expands factories in Vietnam. United States companies are shifting production to Mexico. It's called diversification, the idea that if China becomes too risky, you spread out your bets. And on the surface, it's working. Vietnam's exports to the EU have soared by over 40% since 2020. India's smartphone assembly capacity has tripled. Mexico's maquiladora zones are booming again, just like in the NAFTA days. But look a little closer and you'll see cracks. India still struggles with power reliability and bureaucratic delays. Vietnam faces severe labor shortages and rising wages. And Mexico? It has the location, but not the infrastructure scale China offers. Let's not forget, China's manufacturing ecosystem wasn't built in a day. It's taken decades to build the supply chains, logistics, and talent density that make it the world's factory. You don't replace that overnight. The myth of full decoupling. Politicians love to talk about decoupling, as if the United States could simply walk away from China like a bad ex. But here's the truth. Full decoupling is a fantasy. In 2025, trade between the United States and China still topped $700 billion. Even with tariffs, sanctions, and geopolitical drama, the economic bond remains stubbornly strong. Why? Because the relationship isn't just about where things are made. It's about how global systems are interlinked. A lithium battery in your Tesla might have Chinese graphite. Your iPhone screen? Probably made with Chinese glass. Even United States military gear often includes components sourced from, you guessed it, China. Untangling this web is like trying to remove eggs from a baked cake. And the more you try to rip it apart, the more collateral damage you create. The new reality, China plus one. So what's the smarter strategy? China plus one. Instead of ditching China completely, companies are keeping a core presence there, while adding alternative locations as backups. This is already happening. Apple still relies on Chinese assembly lines, but it's investing billions in India and Vietnam. Automakers are sourcing from both China and Mexico. Even apparel brands are splitting orders across Cambodia, Bangladesh, and China. Think of it like this. You don't abandon your biggest supplier. You hedge your bets. It's less about leaving China and more about mitigating China risk. And for most multinational companies, that's the only realistic path forward. The rise of friendshoring. Here's where it gets geopolitical. Welcome to the age of friendshoring. Friendshoring means relocating production not just based on efficiency, but on who you trust politically. United States companies are now choosing countries that are seen as allies, like Mexico, India, and even Eastern Europe, over potentially hostile powers like China or Russia. It's not just about cheap labor anymore. It's about resilience, about values, about security. But friendshoring comes at a cost. Labor might be more expensive. Logistics might be messy. Productivity might be lower. It's the price you pay to sleep better at night. And while some see this as a new era of industrial rebirth, others worry it could slow down globalization and make goods more expensive for everyone. Diversification is harder than it sounds. Here's something the headlines won't tell you. Diversification is expensive, complex, and slow. Moving a factory isn't like moving a Google Doc. It takes years of planning, regulatory compliance, supplier sourcing, workforce training, and capital investment. And even when companies do shift production, it's often just the final assembly, not the high-tech components or raw materials that still come from China. Case in point, Vietnam assembles tons of electronics, but the chips still come from China or Taiwan. Same with India's smartphone boom. It's mostly assembly, not full-stack manufacturing. So while diversification is happening, it's happening within limits. The dirty secret is we still need China, and probably will for a long time. The future, strategic interdependence. So what's next? The world is moving toward a new kind of global order. Not full decoupling, but strategic interdependence. In this model, the United States and China remain economically linked, but with firewalls, red lines, guardrails. Critical sectors like defense, AI, semiconductors, and biotech will be domestically ring-fenced. But low-margin consumer goods? Still global, still shared. Think of it like a two-speed system. Secure at the core, open at the edges. And this hybrid model might be the only way to avoid full-blown economic Cold War. Because total separation? That would break the world. Leaving China is a story, not a reality. So, can America really leave China? Technically, maybe, but realistically, not anytime soon. What we're seeing isn't an exit, it's a realignment. Supply chains are evolving. Strategies are shifting. Politics is reshaping trade. But China isn't going away. It's still the world's second largest economy, and in many ways, still the backbone of global manufacturing. The goal isn't to abandon China. The goal is to diversify without collapse, to build a world where no single nation can hold the system hostage. And in that story, we're just getting started. Let's take a walk through the heart of America. Not Wall Street, not Silicon Valley, but the rusted, hollowed-out towns that once powered the world. We're talking about cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo, places that use a hum with factories, employ generations of workers, and symbolize the American dream. But today, they're ground zero for one of the most painful economic shifts in modern history. This is the story of how America deindustrialized, and what that means for jobs, the middle class, and our future. Now let's talk about the fall of industrial America. For most of the 20th century, the United States was industry. We built the cars, the planes, the steel, the appliances. We didn't just consume, we created. And these industries didn't just power profits. They built communities. Factory jobs paid well. They came with benefits. A single paycheck could buy a house, raise a family, put kids through college. That was the promise. But starting in the late 1970s and accelerating through the 80s and 90s, that promise began to unravel. Factories closed. Machines replaced workers. Corporations moved production overseas. And the jobs that supported America's middle class vanished. They called it economic restructuring. But for millions of workers, it felt more like betrayal. Welcome to the Rust Belt. No region felt this more than the American Midwest, once called the Manufacturing Belt, now known as the Rust Belt. Cities that once boasted booming industries became shadows of themselves. Detroit lost over 60% of its population from its peak. Youngstown, Ohio, once home to dozens of steel plants, now has entire neighborhoods abandoned. Flint, Michigan, where GM once dominated, became globally known not for its factories, but its water crisis. But this isn't just about urban decay. It's about generational pain. When you shut down a factory, you're not just ending jobs. You're ending healthcare plans, union strength, retirement security, a sense of pride, a sense of purpose. It left a scar, one we still haven't healed. Now, who stole the jobs? Automation versus offshoring. Now here's the million-dollar question. What really caused the job loss? Some blame China. Some blame robots. Some blame greedy CEOs. The truth? It's complicated. Let's break it down. Offshoring. That's when companies move production to other countries to cut labor costs. China, Mexico, Vietnam, you name it. But automation, machines, and software replacing human labor, that's been an even bigger force. From 2000 to 2010, the United States lost over 5 million manufacturing jobs. Studies show that roughly 85% of that loss was due to automation, not foreign labor. Think about it. A robot doesn't need health insurance. It doesn't take breaks. It doesn't unionize. That's hard to compete with. But here's the twist. While machines were taking jobs at home, offshoring was making it easier to outsource what was left. So instead of choosing between automation or offshoring, companies did both. Double the hit, double the pain. Reshoring can really bring jobs back. Lately, there's been a lot of talk about reshoring, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. Politicians love it. It sounds patriotic. It polls well. And it feels like poetic justice. But here's the hard truth. Reshoring isn't the silver bullet people want it to be. Sure, some companies are building new plants in America. Intel is investing in chip manufacturing. Tesla's gigafactories are popping up. Even Apple is exploring more United States assembly. But are the jobs coming back? They're fewer, more technical, and less accessible to the average worker. Today's factories are sleek, automated, and run by engineers, not line workers. Reshoring doesn't mean reversing deindustrialization. It means building a new kind of industry, one that requires new skills. That's a good thing if you have the training. But for displaced workers who spent 20 years on a factory floor, it's a mountain to climb. The middle class meltdown. Let's zoom out. In 1970, over 60% of Americans were considered middle class. Today, it's below 50%. Wages have stagnated. Benefits have shrunk. Gig work has replaced full-time work. And job security? That's a luxury now. When we lost our factories, we didn't just lose jobs. We lost ladders, the kind that let someone without a college degree still build a good life. And it's not just about money. It's about identity. When work becomes precarious, everything becomes precarious. Housing, health, family, community. That's the reality for millions. The oligarch problem. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable: wealth. While towns like Akron, Gary, and Dayton were falling apart, America's billionaire class was booming. CEOs were offshoring jobs and collecting bonuses. Investors were cashing in on stock buybacks. Luxury yachts, private jets, offshore accounts. That became a new American dream for the few. Instead of reinvesting in infrastructure, education, or domestic manufacturing, much of America's elite chose luxury over legacy. They blamed China for stealing jobs, but they were the ones signing the outsourcing deals. Meanwhile, China was using its profits to build roads, ports, high-speed rail, and entire tech ecosystems. Let that sink in. The West enriched itself and spent it on pleasure. China enriched itself and spent it on power. What real reinvestment looks like. If we're serious about bringing back jobs and rebuilding the middle class, then it's not enough to wave flags and build a few factories. We need a national reinvestment strategy. That means funding vocational training and apprenticeships, not just college. Incentivizing advanced manufacturing in every region, not just the coasts. Modernizing infrastructure so logistics compete with Asia. Reforming tax policy to reward reinvestment over speculation. Rebuilding unions so workers have bargaining power again. In short, we need to build an economy that values work, not just wealth. A new social contract. The old model, lifelong employment at one company, rising wages, stable pensions, that's gone. But that doesn't mean we can't build a new one. Maybe the future isn't about going back to the 1950s. Maybe it's about creating a system where technology augments workers, not replaces them. Trade uplift communities, not hollows them out. Profits fund progress, not yachts. This isn't just economics. It's ethics. It's about what kind of country we want to be. The jobs will change, but the mission remains. Here's the takeaway. America's industrial decline didn't happen overnight, and reversing it won't either. Some jobs will come back. Many will evolve. Others will disappear forever. But if we can learn from our past, invest in our people, and hold our elites accountable, we can build something better. Because the middle class isn't just a paycheck, it's the foundation of democracy. And it's worth fighting for. The Rust Belt may be rusted, but it's not dead. It's waiting. Waiting for a country that remembers who built it in the first place. So, where does this all leave us? Let's zoom out for a moment. Over the past several chapters, we've traced the journey of a global system, a system that was never really designed with fairness in mind, but with efficiency, profit, and geopolitics at its core. We talked about the rise of China, not just as a factory, but as a logistics juggernaut, an infrastructure empire, and a master of reinvestment. We saw how Western companies, in the name of quarterly profits, hollowed out their own manufacturing bases, outsourced jobs, and left millions of workers stranded. We explored how that decision wasn't just about economics. It was about national priorities, about the people we reward, about what we choose to build and what we choose to abandon. We dug into the myth of reshoring, how bringing factories back doesn't mean bringing back the same jobs. Because the new factories run on robots and code, not wrenches and muscle. And we unpacked what all this means for the middle class, once the backbone of American prosperity, now struggling to find footing in a post-industrial world. So yeah, globalization worked, but not for everyone. Now let's talk about that little label we've all seen, Made in China. It's more than just a mark of origin. It's a system. When you see that label, you're not just seeing where something was assembled. You're seeing the outcome of decades of industrial policy, infrastructure planning, education investment, currency strategy, supply chain dominance, and yes, labor exploitation. Made in China represents a full-spectrum machine, one where raw materials, ports, highways, electricity, and human capital all move in harmony. It's the product of a nation that decided manufacturing wasn't just about money. It was about power. And that's what we as consumers often miss. Because here's the thing. Every time we choose the cheaper product, every time we opt for next-day delivery, every time we shrug and say, well, that's just the way the world works, we're participating in the system. We're voting not with ballots, but with bank cards. And those votes have consequences. They shape the jobs that exist and the ones that disappear. They decide which communities thrive and which rust. They influence not just economies, but geopolitics. Who dominates trade routes? Who controls critical minerals? Who owns the next wave of innovation? But this isn't about guilt-tripping anyone. It's about awareness. Because when you start to see the system, really see it, you start to ask better questions. Why does this cost so little? Who made it? What did it cost them? What did it cost my community? And most importantly, what kind of future are we building? And for who? Look, globalization isn't inherently evil. It's brought billions out of poverty. It's made goods accessible. It's connected cultures and accelerated innovation. But it also came with trade-offs, many of which were never honestly discussed with the people most affected. Workers were told to retrain. Towns were told to pivot. Entire industries were told they were obsolete. Meanwhile, executives cashed out and Wall Street clapped. So now we're at crossroads. Do we keep outsourcing not just our products, but our power? Do we continue to chase convenience, even if it costs us sovereignty? Or do we rethink the system? That doesn't mean isolationism. It doesn't mean throwing up walls or waving pitchforks. It means asking, what should we be making? Where? Why? And who benefits? It means investing in our people, not just our profits. It means choosing long-term strength over short-term stock prices. It means building systems like China did that align national interest with economic strategy. Because here's the final twist. Dependency isn't just dangerous, it's expensive. When you can't make your own semiconductors, your own antibiotics, your own steel, you're not just at a disadvantage. You're vulnerable. Globalization made the world smaller, but it also made our weaknesses bigger. And if there's one lesson from the past few decades, it's this. Innovation without production is fragile. Finance without factories is hollow. Trade without fairness is unsustainable. So what do? We stop pretending this is someone else's problem. We get serious about skills, infrastructure, reinvestment. We hold corporations accountable, not just for profits, but for purpose. We make Made in America or Made in your country means something again, not as a slogan, but as a strategy. And we remember that the real measure of an economy isn't how rich the richest are, it's how strong the middle is. Globalization was the promise of a shared future. But to make it work for everyone, we have to stop worshiping efficiency and start valuing resilience. Because in the end, a strong nation isn't built on imports, it's built on intention. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button, share it with someone who still thinks outsourcing is just business, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the economics that shape your world.